I was sitting at the funeral for a coworker's baby, and I reflected on the fact that I was happy that I wasn't having to do the message that day. I have a degree in ministry and I'm a pretty good theologian, but sometimes my philosophical nature conflicts with my theological nature, and I just didn't have any real good answers for a time like that. We know that it's just what happens when we live in a fallen world that has sin, sickness, and death. But we wonder why God allows that. We reflect on the story of Job. Satan comes to God and says, how can Job really love you if all you've done is blessed him? He needs a little suffering. And when Job comes and asks God, why have I been suffering? I've been a righteous person. God just shows him his sovereignty. And we understand that we should trust God because of his sovereignty, because of his omniscience, his omnipotence. He is working everything for our greater good. But sometimes that just doesn't seem like a good answer. We can reflect on the first chapter of James like we did the other week. How our faith is perfected through suffering, trials, tribulations. We can reflect on the book of Habakkuk, when God said he was going to do good through evil. He was going to use evil to do good. The armies of Babylon were going to come and capture Judah, send them into captivity. And all of that would bring about an end to their idolatry. But somehow that just doesn't seem like a good answer. And as we're sitting around looking for good answers, Jesus comes along. And he turns the tables on us. And he says, you are the light of the earth. But if salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by man. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anybody light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and gives light to all those who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they might see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Jesus begins to say that something has been done about evil. The church has been put into place to combat the forces of evil, to be the light in the world around it. Some would reflect on this passage as evangelical fervor. And indeed, we are to be the salt and light of hope and love to the world around us. Some would speak about our reflecting the very nature of God as light is reflected to us. And as we are displaying a holy life, indeed we are reflecting the very nature of God. We are showing people who Jesus really is. Salt that is tasteless and light that is hidden are useless. John Wesley's mandate to the Methodist movement was, do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. It is said that the Methodist revival in Britain brought about such changes that they didn't fall into anarchy the same way that the French did. The preaching of the Methodist revival brought about changes to the very nature of society. It brought about William Wilberforce, who would go to Parliament and eventually bring about an end to slavery. This idea of preaching was that it was just not a gospel message, but the gospel message was that of change and reform to the world around it. Headlights that are clouded sort of give us a picture of the church. Some light is getting out, but nothing like it would be if it was clear. The church has been letting out some light, but nothing compared to the potential that they should have. I read a booklet lately. It talked about how there are a lot of preachers, ministries going about buying multi-million-dollar aircraft to better minister. And it contrasted that to the fact that millions are going hungry in the world every day. The idea was that the world looks at the church and sees such things. They don't see light. They don't see saltiness. They don't see Jesus. When they look at the church and they see people who are no different than themselves except for the fact that they go to church every once in a while, they don't see Jesus. Salt that has lost its saltiness is good for nothing other than to be trampled underfoot. The church has fallen from its once respected status in America. At one time it was respected. Preachers were respected, even if the person didn't believe in the gospel message. They understood that there was a place where good values were being taught. It was a place where good things were being done. But now that doesn't seem to be the case. People don't see it as a place where good values are being taught. They see it as a place that is irrelevant to the world and society of today. Part of the idea here is that the church has gone into a build it and they will come mentality. And in often cases, what they are building are monuments to themselves and to their church. It has had some effect. There are hundreds of thousands of people going to some of these churches for whatever value that is. But there are still a lot of people who will never enter the door of such a church. And where do they find the truth? They find it from Christians who are living in salt and light to the world. The Great Society of Lyndon Johnson, in some ways, was a condemnation to the world. The government took over the place of the church, started taking care of the elderly, taking care of the needy, taking care of the oppressed. The church sat back on their laurels and let the government do that. And then, in a great act of hypocrisy, they argued that the government was being too socialistic. And they wonder why the church is being trampled, because it has lost its saltiness, because it is showing no value to the world around it. We were discussing the persecuted and talking about how some people are just persecuted because of their lack of righteousness. And a church that has lost its saltiness, a church that has lost its light, isn't going to be a persecuted church. The devil really doesn't care. In fact, he's really quite happy that they're going about their religious stuff, but having no effect on the world around them. A living, breathing church will be a persecuted church. As someone noted, the best way to know you're alive is by pain. So the great caveat here is that in order for you to send your light among people, you've got to have some light yourself. The parable of the 10 virgins talks about the virgins who came and said to the others, "We need oil for our lamps." And the others said, "Oh, we've only got enough for ourselves." And that is the way it often is with Christians. We're supposed to be giving light to others when we've only got enough light for ourselves. And this is often because we have neglected our spiritual disciplines: prayer, fasting, meditation, quietness, scripture. We have gotten ourselves into a place where we haven't got enough to give anybody else. And we wonder why the church is being trampled beneath the feet of people. The question this morning then is, are we shining in the darkness, or are we afraid of the darkness overcoming us?